Hey everyone, welcome back to another Kitecast episode. This is Patrick Spencer. Unfortunately, my co-host Tim Freestone isn't able to join us. He's on business travel, so I will need to do today, but we have a real treat for us. Joining us is John Chrisley. He, for the past 2 years, has served as the Director of IT Security at Summit 7, based in Fort Myers, Florida. He's an author of 2 books. We're going to talk about both of those on the podcast. He's a former CEO, CIO, CISO, CTO, and a bunch of other acronyms I probably can cite. He speaks frequently at different events. He's a regular guest on different podcasts. He's a board advisor. He has a long list of core certifications and licenses in cybersecurity and compliance. We'll talk a bit about those as well as project management. John, thanks for your service, and thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Patrick. Very happy to be here.
Looking forward to this conversation. Both of these books you published this year, I think. You published one earlier in the year that's more, that's the first book, The Basics of Cybersecurity. It's available on Amazon, along with other locations. And then you have a second book that's more for the kids, How to Keep Your Kids and Parents Safer Online, a guidebook for families. The first book you wrote yourself. The second book, I suspect you wrote with your wife or your kids or your daughter. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm very proud of both books, but I think the second book that I was able to do with my family, I actually did that with my wife and my daughter. My daughter is turning 18 soon, and who better to talk about the cybersecurity perils and issues and things for parents and adults and teens than my own family, who we've grown up through it, and we've grown up with this new tech that's out there. And some of that is a world that I'm still, I'd love to say that I know it all, but let's be honest, I'm just a father at the end of the day, and I'm trying to, navigate these areas. So that book, I try to sort of cover the gamut. It's for parents of children. It's for parents of teens. It's for parents who have elderly parents, because elderly folks, and we have them in our family, are some of the most targeted at times and exploited. And so I was like, we know a lot as a family here in this household. We know a lot. I'm not saying that we're an expert on everything, but we've got a perspective. Let me get this down on paper. And so I utilized what I learned with self-publishing the first book, and I got the family together. I can't say they were always so happy with me sitting down saying, hey, we got to hammer out this chapter, and I need some help on these topics. But we did it. We've got it out there. It's been very well received. I've got everything from church groups to schools and things like that asking me for bulk numbers of copies of these, and it's getting out there into the world, and I couldn't be prouder.
That's great. We've actually interviewed a couple different folks on podcast over the past year and a half. A couple of them actually have authored books on cybersecurity and kids, which is kind of ironic. There's a bunch out there. What differentiates your book from the others that are on the market today?
I'd say one of the things, and I'm not sure because I haven't read those others, I do see a lot of my colleagues and family members who do this. And one of the things, the perspective I wanted to bring was, I'm talking, not only this is my 30th year in IT and security. So not only from a 30-year IT vet like myself, who has a CISSP and all these other acronyms, which makes me think that I know what I'm doing. But beside all that, I brought in the heavyweights. I brought in my wife, who's had to live with me and grow a teenager in this world, and then bring in my daughter herself, her aspect into this. And I'm so proud that they were able to now be named authors. They have a book on Amazon, not just me. And it's the perspective. I'll give you an example just really succinctly here. I'd like to, when we talk about social media, sure, I know, LinkedIn and Facebook and even Instagram. And yes, I know TikTok, but that's about it. You get into Snapchat and some of these others, and even TikTok to the extent that the teens know it. I'm not in my comfort zone. I have to bring in people that know that. So I brought in my daughter. That's the perspective. Is we're trying to talk from a real life, real world, boots on the ground, as if my daughter wrote the book by herself. But we tried to bring all the aspects. And then the other side too is I've got elderly in-laws who have almost been scammed in their past. Luckily, they knew to call us, and we were able to keep them out of the dangerous waters. But I'm like, we have a lot of elderly family and friends, and I wonder if this perspective and what we teach our in-laws could help others keep themselves out of trouble. And there's actually I think it's cool. Maybe it's the geek in me, but at the very end of the book, those that actually buy the book, if you do the online book, you don't get this, but the actual paperback, the very last page, there's a coloring exercise for kids, but there's also a guide for seniors. They can actually print out these kind of 5x7 cards, if you will, like take the paper out of the book, because elderly people in our generation, they like to have paper. Where can I print it? Where can I keep it? And so I actually have this cutout. It's almost a little bigger than a postcard, and it's got some important numbers of agencies you can call if you're in trouble, but also where they can write in their local police department and other areas. And I wanted to give everybody that ability to have at their fingertips, so they're not alone. They might be alone, they might be living alone, but they're not alone any longer. They've got our combined expertise helping them along.
Yeah, just don't write their passwords on that last page in the book, right?
There's no section to write down the password. Yeah, we talk about that for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've dealt with my mom in terms of her use of the internet, and they didn't grow up with it. It's a completely different perspective to your point. And then my daughter's a little bit older than yours. She's just finished her second master's degree. Now she's looking for a job. But she has a different perspective, and she uses social media that I don't use, or if I do use it, I don't use it in the same way she uses it, right?
Correct.
And that's interesting that you brought your daughter in so you can have that perspective. And the other authors, most of them probably aren't. They're, our age, maybe they're a little bit younger, and they're writing these books because they have kids in the household. They've seen, the dangers or, the potential dangers that exist with the internet, and they want to, provide something that is useful, just not for their family, but for a much broader audience. And that's the
Correct.
genesis of, for their actual writing projects. So how long did it take to write the book,
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of people say, wait a minute, you released 2 books in the same year. And I think they may have come out a month difference. But the thing is, behind the scenes, I had to learn the whole self-publishing, and I'm very proud of that too. Self-publishing on Amazon, self-writing a book, which wasn't the hard part exactly, but self-publishing. And I didn't have to go to some big publishing house. I do have to commend Amazon's Kindle Direct Network. Just a little plug there. They made it very easy for me to get these through the process. You had some rules that I had to follow, and a lot of it was formatting and things like that. But once I figured that out, they have a book for that, as a matter of fact, and I read it and learned how to do it. Then I was able to quickly get through the process, and so it probably comes as no surprise. You might say, are there any other books next? Yeah, I've got an entire laundry list of topics that I want to talk about and get those ideas out of my head. It's sort of what I can give back to the community at large. And these ideas and I had my own podcast for a while. I like doing this better, and I like writing because then it's memorialized, and it's not even about the money. There are some commissions that come with it, but it probably took the better part of a year to conceive it and lay down the ideas. And I spent a lot of time in front of the computer with the voicing into Word my content, and just speaking it away, and then going back and being super critical of my own speaking and writing and trying to make it suitable for publication, which probably took the amount of time. But in a year's time, we were able to get 2 books out the door. And now it's just a matter of time before I have more of them out there. So
that's great.
Yep.
So the other book is more for, the professional out in the marketplace. Talk a bit about it. That was published about a month, as you said, before the second book.
Yeah. So the first one, it's called The Basics of Cybersecurity, and I'm very proud of that one. So I've done a lot of speaking, writing, blogging, you name it, speaking at conferences. I got into mentoring along the way, and I do a lot of mentoring. I'm a certified fraud examiner, and I actually belong to the ACFE's mentor group, and so I mentor a lot of people that are coming up, trying to, get to that level in their career. And what I found, the reason for the book was I found that I just kept repeating myself, especially people that are either coming out of college. I do a lot of speaking at colleges to MBA groups, as a matter of fact. I'd go to a lot of areas where they teach cybersecurity degrees, and they'd want somebody to come in from industry and speak. What is it really like? What's the job really like to be a CISO? And I just kept repeating myself over and over and over. I sort of had a pitch that I would do. And I was like, you know what, let me lay this down on paper and let me get it out there in the form of a book. And so It's not just for somebody who's looking for that career advice. It's really about you. So you want to get into cybersecurity, and it doesn't matter what level, whether you're first coming out of college and you want your first job as an analyst, or you're a little more experienced, you're an engineer, you're trying to climb a ladder, or you're already an executive in cybersecurity, but you're having trouble maybe with board presentation. And I know that's a lot to cram under this topic. Matter of fact, I got some critique, very much needed in my situation, from people who said, John, you probably could spin that off into like 3 or 4 different books. I'm like, you're right. Yeah. This was my first one. I had all these ideas that I wanted to just lay down in paper. It resonates obviously with the feedback I've gotten. Different chapters, if you will, resonate with different people in their career. But, I'm talking from my perspective. This is what it's really like to do the job of cybersecurity. It's not all glamour and glitz. There is some of that at times. It can be very lucrative, very rewarding. It can also be the most boring thing on the face of the planet, especially when you're the guy or girl that has to write policy or do auditing. That can be a very thankless job. But it's a truth serum book. This is what it's really like. These are the basics of what's out there. Everything from how to secure systems. First, you have to know what you have to secure, how to wrap your hands around this, and some things that hopefully, and the feedback has been, hopefully it gives readers kind of a launching pad. They can go back and they say, wow, that's interesting. I learned something. Let me go back in my day job, my profession, or my studies and actually put that into practice. And I wanted it to do that. And so far, the feedback is that it's hitting its mark in that realm.
Oh, that's great. Well, you talk a bit about mentorship and coaching, right? There's a lot of discussion about the paucity of the pipeline of new cybersecurity professionals, and we don't have enough. And there's a cybersecurity skills gap. I've been talking about it since I've been in cybersecurity, about 15, 20 years at least. You think, there's new programs like a cybersecurity degree, which wasn't available 10 years ago, that you can actually do. And there's a master's program now in cybersecurity that you can embark on. So there's certainly educational routes that will help fill some of those gaps. But mentorship, in my opinion, is an area that is underexplored. At Fortinet, we had a program where they were mentoring those who were just coming out of the military and mentoring them and coaching them and giving them a way to make that transition from the private sector into the public sector and a transition into the cybersecurity profession. What are your thoughts on that matter? It sounds like that's something you've put a lot of thought into already.
Yeah, I want to go back to the first concept, which is, cybersecurity industry and the job market, and there's not enough skilled professionals. And I see that. I read it. I read, some of the same material. What's interesting is I see the other side. I see the companies that are laying off like crazy. There was a round this week from a very famous company. I won't mention. I don't like to dig at any company. They're going through what they're going through, but thousands are hitting the market, and a lot of them are cybersecurity people. I see the side where now I've got a very large LinkedIn network, not the biggest of people that I know, but I've got a very large, extensive network that I'm very proud I've built over the years. And, I do a lot of helping. If you call it pro bono, I help a lot of my peers try to find jobs. And so I'm sitting here going, wait a minute, I know about a lot of people at all different levels, from analyst to engineer to architect to executive and management, right? I know a lot of people. They've had the open to work banner on their LinkedIn for a long time. Some people more than a year. They can't find a job. And I'm going, so wait a minute, what's going on here? And they'll tell me, but John, I'm applying to everything on LinkedIn and Indeed and other places. Every job I'm getting automated emails almost instantly. It's been filled or you don't qualify. We're hearing about ghost jobs being posted by unethical companies that just seem to want to show that they've got. I don't even know why this is going on in our world. They're posting jobs.
8% uptick due to AI. I noticed last year. There's an article yesterday.
Correct. Yeah, it's just crazy, and I don't understand it. My peers don't understand it. We're getting very bitter and jaded with this concept. But I'm telling you, I don't know where this idea of there's not enough cybersecurity pros. I don't see it. Now, maybe I don't have enough exposure out there. I happen to know. I'm actually talking to a lot of staffing firms, not because they want to recruit me, because I'm happy. I've got a job. I'm very happy where I am. But I know a lot of people. And, there's a lot of recruiting firms and they're going, but we just don't have enough jobs for the amount of people that are out there. So I'm going, I don't get it. I don't know what it is in this world. The AI is affecting the job search market in what perceives to be a very negative way. I happen to use AI to help my out of work friends and colleagues with matching up their resume to the job and helping make sure it's well written. But that's not the problem. If anybody listens to this and they're looking for cybersecurity pros, hit me up. I can give you lots of referrals to people. Now, we went through COVID, and I'd say we're on the tail end of that, if you will, as a country. I understood, everybody wanted to work from home. I work from home, as you can tell. I'm very happy with working from home. There's a lot of people that they came out of COVID. They don't want to go back to the office. That's not for them. They found their at-home jobs. And now I'm seeing a lot of companies say, no, now you got to come back into the office. Well, I think that's affecting their ability to attract and retain talent. The generation we're in, which is post-COVID generation, I'm not talking age at all, but the post-COVID generation is most people want to work from home. They figured out how to do it during COVID, and they're very comfortable. And some people are scared to go back to an office environment because COVID is not eradicated completely yet. So very interesting times we live in.
Yeah, very, very true. Let's switch over to your current role over at Summit 7. I think you just finished 2 years a month or so ago. Talk a bit about the company and what you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very proud. This is my, I know LinkedIn says it's a little more, but I think this is the month for 2 years, almost to the day, that I joined Summit 7. And I had come from a company that was doing something very similar before that, but I idolized Summit 7 from afar before I joined them, and I was looking for a way in. And the only advice I can have to people that are looking is, don't relent, be relentless. I pursued Summit 7 and I found my way in. Now I'm a former VP and CISO, and you would think, well, wait a minute, you didn't take a CISO job. No, I didn't. I took a security architect role because that's what they had available. They paid better than I've made in the past as a CISO. I'll tell you that. So Summit 7 Systems, a lot of people know them, some don't, but they are a managed service provider and managed security provider for DoD contractors. So in the Department of Defense world, we don't typically always get the big prime companies. We get their subcontractors. Those subcontractors are going through right now the need to become CMMC level 2 and NIST 800-171 compliant, even though that CMMC rule is not yet finalized officially and rolled out. It's been around long enough where everybody knows it's coming, it's going to be, and you better get on board a long time ago. And so Summit 7 services those customers almost exclusively. They've been doing it for a lot of years, very successful. The company's now right at about 200 employees-ish, maybe a little more, a little less, depending on the day. And boy, that's what attracted me to them. They do it the right way. I've seen a lot of companies out there, they try to do it. They want to do it, but either they don't have the resources, the skilling, or the money to invest internally. And boy, Summit 7 just blows it out of the water. I can't say enough about them. That's why I tracked them down and found any way I could to get on board. I mean, I would have taken a project management role if they would have had me just to get in the door. And then I was fortunate to be promoted to my current role of Director of IT Security. I was over their IT and security for a period of time. They've got a brand new CIO who is my boss that they've appointed. And so he took IT, which allowed me to come back and focus on IT security, which is a big job because at Summit 7, we do it for our customers, but what we learn from our customers or what we learn internally, typically then we either, roll things back out to our customers that we learned, or we learn from our customers and then we bring it in-house. So we're constantly learning. I'm constantly working with our product development team to roll out new offerings and upgrades. And so, I'm sorry, that was supposed to be a short explanation, turned into a long one, but that's Summit 7 for you.
Well, you bring up an interesting topic. The CMMC stuff has been important to our business because, we comply with many of the check marks when it comes to the controls on the CMMC 2.0 front. and we have a lot of organizations that contact us because they are able to accelerate their ability to achieve the compliance that's right around the corner, as you just noted. You guys, I assume, are 2.0 certified, and then you're working with a number of clients who aren't, and you're trying to get them there. Where's the maturity level when you look at CMMC, and do you help, someone who contacts you, do you help them get there faster so they don't put their DoD business at risk?
Yeah, so to be clear, we're not certified. Not too many people are, except for those customers who are able to get into the early assessment process because nobody else, the rule's not final. We can't, and so we're a vendor. Just plain, putting it out there, we're a vendor. We're not a government contractor per se, where we're manufacturing things and holding the data. We are a service provider to those customers. We cannot get CMMC certified, quote unquote, yet. And we're hoping eventually to be able to. Now, we think at some point what we do for customers and other MSPs like us, we may have to be CMMC level 3 certified, because that's the level that we may have to be. We're looking at all sorts of things. We have a lot of compliance frameworks and certifications that we're running after as a company to try to make sure that we're as prepared as possible. But what we do is we help our customers because we know what's coming. It's a very clear roadmap. A lot of customers will come and we've heard this in the industry. They'll say, "Oh my God, it's so hard and it's so expensive." Well, it doesn't have to be. And we're a company where we look at this and say, it's not hard. Expensive is in the eye of the beholder. We do a lot of work with SMB. Okay. And I know the very, very, very micro SMBs, the mom and pops, the literal mom and pops, they could view this as expensive because maybe they never had patch management and SIM and other kind of things in place. And maybe now they have to make some investments. But the typical SMB, and SMB phrase it or define it how you like. Typically, we're getting anywhere from 50 to 250 employees is kind of the world that we're seeing that's coming to us. They typically already have a lot of these systems in place, or they're looking to migrate from another MSP and come to us. And we have a compliance team that will come in and audit and see, well, it's like a health check. Okay, let's see how good you're doing. You may have more than you think you have, but nobody's ever told you how good or bad you are. And so we will come in, we'll do that health check. We'll tell you where it's kind of like give credit where credit is due, but then call out the areas where there's gaps. And a lot of customers find out, wow, we actually do have a lot of things in place, but we don't have it documented. We can't prove it to an assessor. And that's where your policies and your procedures, getting you ready for the eventual audit that is to come. For CMMC, you're going to engage with a 3CPAO. Always got to love the acronyms. Yeah. And they're going to come in and they're going to do the audit. And that's what we do is we get you ready for the audit.
Interesting. Yeah. Yep. The maturity level, it sounds like, are some of them surprised they're this far along? It's probably because from a legacy standpoint, there's DFARS, there's NIST 800-171. If you're talking about, level 3.0 even, you're talking about 172, because those have been around a while. You find that more organizations are a little farther along than they expect when they start looking at CMMC, or, is it, we should have paid attention to these regulations we haven't in the past?
That I think is closer to the truth right there. Is I'm finding, and I think we are, I don't want to speak for, everybody that we run across, but I think we're finding a lot of people still, they drag their feet. As you said, they were supposed to be doing a lot of this for DFARS years and years ago. So it's like, why didn't they? Well, my background, so I've worked for private colleges, university. I've also worked in healthcare. There were things like FERPA and PCI and HIPAA. And it was the same thing. Like, nobody pays attention to this stuff. Honestly, this is the industry. Nobody pays attention to those things until they have to, until they start losing contracts or being unable to bid on work. And so a lot of the primes are now flowing this down saying, well, you've got this in place, right? You told us that you had this in place, and you can't lie anymore. You better not lie about it anymore. But we are finding that a lot of people who are surprised just didn't pay attention to it. They you know, back when, before this new level of CMMC rules coming out, self assessments and self governance was sort of the rule of the world. Yeah, attestation, exactly. That's the right word. And you know, everybody found that doesn't work. Okay, it just doesn't work. And don't ask me why I'm smiling into the camera, because I can tell you why it doesn't work, you know, but people are paying attention now. I think, well, those that are, there's going to be a lot, there's all these DoD subcontractors, and there's numbers out there. They're in the tens of thousands, okay, of companies that will have to get certified. And talk about a gap. We have a gap of 3 CAPAO companies. And while there are dozens now, there's still not enough. You know, if the rule comes down and they start enforcing that, these companies are going to come out of the woodwork, and now they're going to pick up the phone and say, okay, now I need to take this seriously, because my prime is telling me that until I officially attest that I've done it, you know, back in the day, you could have a SPURS score that was self-attested to, put it in the SPURS database, SPURS system online, and go along. But it was, I got to be honest, I think the majority of it, from what we've seen, it was all false and fake. It takes me back to the old PCI applications and cyber insurance applications, where it's saying, are you PCI compliant? And people were checking yes. And yet when the truth came out, they weren't any closer to that than they were a millionaire. You know what I mean? It's just crazy.
We did a webinar, I think it's been a little more than a year ago, about a year ago, on CMMC. We've done several of them, but one of them we cited some research. I think it's from Cybersheath. I'd have to go back and look at my records. It's like 70% who did self-attestation and thought they were compliant with 2.0 and all 110 controls actually aren't. They thought they were, but they aren't. So I think that corroborates your point that you have a lot of organizations out there that may be overconfident in terms of the fact that they're compliant, and now there's teeth. It seems to me that you got to have teeth in these regulations in order for them to really take hold. In the case of CMMC, it's you're going to lose business with the DoD. It's going to go away. Your revenue is going to, disappear.
Yeah, that flow down of that risk. You're absolutely right, Patrick. That flow down of that risk. I mean, it's like, who's the teeth? Who's enforcing it? Well, the primes are going to enforce it, because they're going to say, you have to show us. And we've actually seen it. By the way, I've seen this now for 4 years. That's how long I've seen this, where a certain prime, and there's a couple of them, I don't want to mention them here on camera, but there's a couple primes where they've had these questionnaires. And so anybody listening that's been through this, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Before, because the primes couldn't get access to the score, they couldn't get, they couldn't get access to this stuff. So they had a questionnaire that they put out, and I've seen it. I've had it in my hands, because customers will say, can you help us fill this out? And it's very crafty the way it's worded. Since you can't get access as a prime to the SPURS score, they'd say, are you compliant with DFARS 7012? Are you compliant with NIST 800, 171? Have you implemented this number of controls? Have you implemented this number plus, another 50? And if you're an astute and procurement officer at the prime, when you get this questionnaire back, you could tell you could almost guess what their score is, their SPURS score, by looking at the results of this questionnaire. And yet they didn't ask you for your SPURS score. They didn't ask you, the word CMMC wasn't even on there.
Huh.
And there were ramifications to it. If you answered it honestly as a sub, and it was not a good set of answers because you haven't been paying attention, and you put that back, that procurement officer may prohibit you from bidding or renewing any work. There's your teeth.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. So, and I think more of it is coming.
Well, I think we're seeing it with GDPR. We're going to see it, I think, with the state data privacy regulations, CCPAs starting to issue their fines and penalties. GDPR was, last year, more than the previous 3 years combined, or 2019 through 2021, I believe. HIPAA, the fines were up last year. So, when you put teeth behind these regulations, then you achieve compliance. Self-attestation just doesn't work in many instances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Patrick, I want to go back just once. Oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I want to draw an analogy here also for people that are wondering. In my past, I worked for a outsourced call center BPO company for a while, and they had a customer that they took on, a call center customer, who required them to be high trust certified. And at that point, I didn't have any high trust experience. And it was, well, that's HIPAA on teeth. There was HIPAA, then high tech, and then high trust. And high trust was, in my humble opinion, that is what CMMC level 2, 800, 171 is now. It's the verification. It's no longer self. You have to have a company come in and do the actual assessment, right? It's like the difference in PCI between doing a self online and having a SAG-D where somebody has to come in and, actually verify. And high trust was no joke. And the ramifications was, in the company that I was with, unfortunately, they did fail their first high trust certification, and there was too many findings. They had to go back and fix a lot of things. So most of it was documentation, process and procedure documentation. And I look at that as like, that's what we're going through now is you're going to see, and the ramifications were that the customer who required us at that time to be high trust, they said, if you're not high trust, you cannot bid on this business. And it was a multi-million-dollar, multi-year contract for business. They said, sorry, we're only taking companies that are high trust certified.
Interesting.
That's where the compliance framework and that standard came in and really prevented business. And it's rough. Trust me, that company that I worked for, they jumped all over getting serious about it then and saying, well, now we want to get to the point where we take this seriously. So,
yeah. Where do you, that brings up an interesting topic on the FedRAMP side of the house. Are you starting to see that where if you're not FedRAMP moderate, then you can't do business with certain segments of the government, DOD specifically? And, when we're talking about FedRAMP high, do you see that as something that's become more and more prevalent?
Yeah. So in our world here at the company I work for now, FedRAMP is the rule of the land, if you will. Our CEO is very, very smart, and he looks ahead into the future. There's a rule we have where if you're not in the FedRAMP marketplace as a product, we probably cannot use you as a service, because we have to buy products and services ourselves to use for ourselves and use for our customers. If your product is not FedRAMP, if it's not anything, equivalent, whatever, if it's not in that FedRAMP marketplace, then the rule that we have is either then we have to host you in our GCC high cloud and Azure, the government high cloud, or if you say no, as a vendor, you won't let us host you, you can't air gap us in there, right? Then we simply can't use you. So it's a big part of our world here at our company, and for our customers, it's a big topic, and it's a very contentious topic too, because the rule hasn't said that everything has to be FedRAMP yet. But there's so much pointing to it. We're not taking any chances. That's the thing. That's what I love about our CEO. He doesn't want to take any chances. We'd rather, there's some customers say, hey, we don't believe. We think we can get there by hosting everything in a commercial tenant and using commercial tools. Well, swim at your own risk. We're not going to take that chance for ourselves and our customers. We're going to try to do the right thing. Sure, that means that some of the services are a little bit more expensive because now we're talking about everything has to be U.S. based and handled by U.S. personnel, U.S. data centers, right? That's because we're trying to do it right. We're trying to make sure that we're protecting the American warfighter. That's what, the DoD subcontractors, they're building for DoD and military purposes. But we just don't want to take any chances that could cripple because, we didn't realize. And this is what we find, Patrick. There's a lot of great products on the market. I've used them back in my commercial days. But when you're talking about the government, you may put a product in use and you don't realize that it's got hooks out to another cloud who will remain nameless. And maybe the people that have access to that cloud are not U.S. citizens. And they're, it's not on U.S. soil. And that's where it gets real dangerous. And we're simply not willing to take that risk.
Yeah. Do you find, there's been this trend in the marketplace the past few years where organizations will claim, well, we're FedRAMP-like, which doesn't mean they've gone through the certification process. There's 400 or 500 certifications with moderate, right? And they're stringent. And the certification process, they evaluate each one. And if you don't pass one, you have to go back and make a remediation to get the certification, as you well know. Are organizations waking up that those that claim FedRAMP-like, it really doesn't work because it's FedRAMP-like, not really FedRAMP?
So here's my take on that, and what I've seen, and I see this quite a bit. And boy, what another loaded topic here. The FedRAMP equivalent, and I think that's actually written into some things. And that's what's the sort of the problem, right, with CMMC is I think there is some wording around it either has to be FedRAMP at a certain level or FedRAMP equivalent at that level. Well, the problem is, right, the people that wrote all that, they're not giving guidance about, well, what is FedRAMP equivalent? Now, I will tell you, I've got some peers in the industry, and there's some companies, they sort of hang their hat on this going, we can get there. We know how to do that. We have an opinion on what FedRAMP equivalent is. And I will tell you, it's not impossible. It is possible to do. And I only know of a handful of companies out there that really, really get it. And what I mean is, look, let's talk about some easy things, right? If you're setting up computers for customers or yourself, are you STIG imaging them? Are you using, ACAS tools to vulnerability scan? And if I'm using terms right now that you don't, I'm not saying you, Patrick, but anybody listening, if they don't understand the words coming out of my mouth right now, that's a problem. Because only those that understand how to build secure systems to a standard, to a level, how to, go to this level. A lot of IT companies and MSP companies are out there. I don't want to take anything away from them. They know how to manage IT, but they don't know how to build to what I'll call DoD spec. Okay. Those that do can likely get there. And I will be honest with you, you probably could build in almost any government cloud. I am concerned about some of the commercial clouds because where are they? Where are they hosting the data on the backside?
Yeah.
Where's their recovery sites on the backside? Who's got the ability? That's what scares me a lot about espionage and insider threat, which is a big part of my job. But if you're in a government cloud, for example, I know AWS has, their AWS Gov Cloud, and I partnered with them in the past before coming to this company. You can build a very secure set of, virtual machines and networks and all that, but you got to be able to do it. That's the point. You got to be able to say, this is how we build this to this spec. And you better be able to bet your paycheck on it and stand up and plant your flag and say, I will defend this to the death. Not literally, but maybe the death of your career if it's not built to that spec, because nothing else should suffice. And there's people that just kind of fake it and say, no, I think it's secure. I've applied all the patches and I've got good, endpoint antivirus EDR. Okay, but that's not enough. That's not enough. And the people that don't know, they'll defend what they're doing to the death. And you put them up against the people that actually know how to build secure systems and that have been around government systems. And, we go back to, the manuals of the past. I mean, I grew up in the mainframe era and then, came from that. I'm not as old enough to remember punch cards, but I definitely came through mainframes and you learn back then how to build a secure system. And unfortunately, too many companies and people nowadays don't. And unfortunately, the kids coming out of college, I hate to call them kids, but they are more than half my age at this point. They're coming out of school and they don't learn this typically in most, I don't even care if it's a PhD level cybersecurity course. They don't learn how to lock down systems to the nth degree like they should. Otherwise, we'd be in a lot better position than we are as an industry.
No. We're about out of time. I wanted your thoughts on, we just published our annual survey report around sensitive content communications, privacy, and compliance. And we added a few, asked some of the same questions every year, and then we add some new questions, obviously. Then we did some cross-analysis. We found that organizations that have, we said, do you have more, do you have 2,500 to 5,000 or 1,000 to 2,500? Do you have more than 5,000 third parties that you share and send information with? And how many tools do you use to share and send that information? And are they in their own silos? We found two things. One that said they have over 5,000 third parties. They had a much higher report rate in terms of data breaches than their peers. And then those that said they have 7+ communication tools for email and file sharing and MFT and web forms and so forth, they also had a much higher breach rate, like 3 times is what the data came out to be. From your experience, when you evaluate risk, is consolidation on the horizon from a tool standpoint? And then, it seems that the number of third parties organizations exchange information with, it's hard to get away from that. That's the the core of our business for most businesses nowadays. How do you manage all that? So that's a whole different podcast in and of itself, but I would be interested in your thoughts on those two subjects.
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, there's way too many tools out there on the market, and as a former CISO, and I'm sort of in that role now, just not by title, but most CISOs have to deal with just so many tools. Many have been bought and just put on the shelf and not really utilized to their fullest potential. I've seen that over and over. I used to be a SIM specialist. I would be brought in to fix failing SIMs, or they lost their SIM guy or girl, and they needed a get well plan for the SIM. Nowadays, my specialties include CASB and DLP and information protection. And I got to tell you, part of the problem why you're seeing the numbers you're seeing is that people do not have a good handle on information as it's leaving their organization. Probably the biggest thing that they've been able to tackle, if they've been able to tackle this, is encryption, by email encryption, or maybe secure FTP or secure file transfer. A lot of companies still haven't even gotten over that hurdle yet. They need to advance and mature into the world of DLP and CASB, because only when you get visibility into the cloud apps that are being used by your employees do you realize how little control and visibility you really had. And I'll just use one example, just for sake. Nobody likes to say that they allow Dropbox unless they do, and I'm not trying to pick on Dropbox or Box. I could throw a couple vendors. A lot of times, though, when you get a CASB tool or a CASB monitoring tool in there, you'll find that people are using it, and they're not using the corporate edition that you would buy if you were to buy such a tool. That means you have no idea the data that is possibly leaving your organization. Are they just putting their resume in Dropbox or getting files for their fundraiser that they're doing at church? Or are they stealing your intellectual property and your trade secrets? You don't know because you can't even see it. So I'm a firm believer in the need to have good visibility. As a CISO, I couldn't work anymore unless I had visibility into all the applications that are in use, all the cloud applications that are in use. Even though I might not be able to do anything about it right away, I've got to be able to have that CASB level visibility and I'm able to see what's going on. And then you start to break into that, going, all right, well, let's dive into this. What is that being used for? And then you get into the data loss prevention, where you're trying to, and information protection boundaries, where you're trying to put some labels on your sensitive data so that you can watch it better and control it, and maybe automatically encrypt so you don't have to think as hard about it. Okay. But I think just too many companies, and again, I'm very blessed and privileged that I joined a company. I'm on the internal side, right? I don't deal with our customers as much. I deal in our internal corporate IT and security, but I'm protecting us. And by protecting us, I'm protecting our customers. And I'm sitting in front of the steering wheel of these tools, and I'm very blessed because it's made my life easier as a practitioner. Whereas in the past, I'm like, gosh, I don't even know where to start, and it can get out of hand real quick. And again, we're a company of 200 employees. Imagine the company with, when I worked in healthcare, 15,000 employees, 2,500 doctors, and they just had no idea where data might be going. And that's when you get into trouble very quickly.
Yeah. In terms of content tagging and classification and knowing where it sets and where it's going, who it's being sent to, and you got to have that real-time monitoring. And the more tools you have, the harder it is to have that consolidated log and visibility into what's actually happening. You're spot on. I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. It's a perfect segue based on the answer you just gave me. How do you deal with all the AI threats, right? You have all this data that employees have access to. Some of it's private personal information, PII, PHI, corporate secrets, IP, and there's these public AIs out there, and they're so alluring, right? They make your jobs much easier, make you a lot more efficient, but they're public LLMs. You ingest that confidential data into it, it's exposed to the world, and it incurs a compliance violation in many instances. So as a head of security, how do you deal with that? Or how do your customers deal with that issue?
Well, here's what we did and what I recommend. First and foremost, you got to get in front of it. Now is this time as good as any. I mean, we got in front of it a long time ago at our company. first thing, and I went out and I got myself as educated as possible. I've got a couple of certs, but that really means nothing. It means I think I know how to use a couple of the engines pretty well, and I do. I use them daily. In my personal life, I use them all the time. At work, very carefully. And what we did first is first thing I was taught is you got to have a policy, right? This is not, you would think it's easy. You would think your employees know, but they don't. And they're not necessarily trying to steal all your data and be malicious and cause issues and incidents and breaches. They just simply don't know. So first, you've got to teach them. And so the first thing we did is we came up with a written policy. I wrote it. I think I actually used AI to help write the AI policy, because why not? And because I want to make sure that I didn't forget about anything that maybe I should think about. And so I used it, and we came up with an AI policy, and then we trained. That's very important. Don't just put your policies out there and leave them. And I've worked with attorneys in the past at certain companies that say, well, you put it out on the policy portal and it's up to the employees to read it. No, wrong, in my humble opinion. I've spent some time internally. You've got to sit down. We have lunch and learns. We have internal, sessions. You got to talk to your employees and explain what this is about and give some examples, because that's when you're going to get the feedback from people. And, we started out very, very simple. We said, look, you wouldn't put CUI or PHI into Google browser, right? You may not want the answer to that, by the way, sometimes at certain companies. But at least at our company, our employees were like, well, yeah, of course, John, we would never do that. Okay, good. We're on the right track. Think of this as a browser. Do not put that sensitive data into this tool. That's not what it's there for. And then we gave a whole bunch of examples. Well, here's what it is very useful for. I know HR departments and sales and marketing, they love to use this for their purposes. And you know what? When you use it properly and under the right rules of engagement, there's nothing wrong with it, in my humble opinion. They can really enable, and we're seeing a lot of software tools and products that now have AI enabled in them. Again, use very carefully. But if you engage with your employees and you keep the conversation going and make it a little bit fun, because that's what I do. I think it's very fun. I love that part of my job. Even the policy writing for that was fun. And then you find out, and people will come to you. Now we have people raising their hand going, hey, we want to do this one thing, but we want to make sure it's okay. Well, good. Thank you for coming forward. And there's got to be a reward system for that. Sometimes the answer is yes, you can go do what you're looking to do. Or sometimes the answer is no, please don't. And then you need ways to monitor, which takes me back to the sensitivity labels and the DLP and the monitoring, the activity monitoring. Nobody likes to talk about this in our world, but you do have to monitor at times what your employees are doing so that you can find out, are there any violations going on that somebody didn't even think it was a violation, but it is. Yeah. And AI is a big threat, but it doesn't have to be. You can embrace it and use it for what you need to use it for safely.
Some very helpful recommendations for our audience. I completely agree with you on all the points you elucidated. And we could go on for another hour, but unfortunately we don't have another hour. We have to get back to our day jobs. I know our audience is going to find this conversation very, very helpful. For those who want more information on Summit 7, they simply go to your website. If they want to purchase one or both of your books, which we encourage, you go to Amazon and do so. If they want to get in touch with you, John, reach out on LinkedIn. Is that the best way to do so?
Yeah, probably the best way is look me up on LinkedIn. I mean, if anybody does want to email me, it's very simple. It's jchrisley@gmail.com. It's spelled jchristly@gmail. In addition to the 2 books, I actually did 2 courses that are on Udemy. You can look me up by name there. One is a course about cybersecurity leadership and how to become a CISO, a very specific topic. And the other one was, since we've been talking about NIST and CMMC, it was an overview of the NIST 800-171 controls, and I call it Made Simple, a step-by-step guide on how to comply with 800-171, which is the basis of CMMC Level 2. And, I've gotten a lot of good feedback that it's helped people understand and take the complexity out of it, which was my intent, why I laid that down as a course, and both of those are on Udemy as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. We had that on our list of topics to cover, and we just ran out of time. So, but they both mapped into the conversation we had. So thanks for bringing that up. Well, to our audience, we appreciate you joining another Kitecast episode. We encourage you to check out other Kitecast episodes at kiteworks.com/Kitecast. Have a great day.